I guess the best way to describe what's happening today and tonight at UTA is a compromise commencement. Earlier this year, the administration of the university announced that because the fall semester ended before the Christmas holidays, there would be only one commencement for all graduates, and that one scheduled for May. And because of the large number of graduates, they couldn't be recognized individually, but rather as a group. Well, the students complained that since they had worked for 4 years for a degree, the least the school could do was to let them walk across the stage, thus the compromise commencement. This afternoon, the 5 schools of the university held individual ceremonies recognizing the candidates personally, such as this one for the School of Liberal Arts. Tonight, the main one, here in Texas Hall, and it officially graduates the 800 students as a group. The students are satisfied with individual recognition, the administration with a shorter commencement exercise, and the parents, well, they're probably twice as proud. Jerry Park, Channel 8 News on the Move, the University of Texas, Arlington.
It gives me, as president of the Press Club Foundation, great pleasure to present this check for some $22,000 to you, Dr. Priest and Mr. Thornton.
Thank you very much, Travis. On behalf of the Dallas County Junior College District, I certainly want to express our appreciation for this very generous gift. I think it will make a substantial difference in terms of the things we can do with our journalism program. We anticipate that it will go into scholarships and also will partially go to an endowed chair in journalism at one of the colleges. Again, our deepest appreciation.
I could stand here in the middle of the Fort Worth Amtrak Santa Fe rails all day long and wouldn't really have to worry about being hit. The trains here, like everywhere across the nation, have come to a screeching halt today due to the signalmen's strike. The picket lines were up early today. For instance, in Dallas at the South Terminal Switching Yard, a lone picket, R.R. Corley, signaled the stoppage of work there. Pickets are also up in Garland, East Dallas, here in Fort Worth, San Antonio, Houston, and other points across the state. The picket lines have forced the supervisory personnel at each railway station to go to work in the positions usually held down by the union employees. That situation is true here in the Fort Worth offices of Santa Fe. There was a lone picket man in front of the Santa Fe station today. I talked with him, a 26-year man with the railroads, J.T. Hall. Is anyone working the rail yards today here?
The supervisory forces is all I know of.
But there's no union people crossing the line?
Not that I know of. No, sir.
How long do you think this is going to last?
I wouldn't have any idea till President Chamberlain tells me to go home.
There are over 1 million families in the United States, in the several states, where if you look at it not on moral grounds as far as the acts of a family or an individual, but on financial incentives of public policy, that the children within those 1 million families that are now intact, husband, wife, mother, father, and children, those children would be better off financially if the man either quit his job because he's working full-time at very low wages and went on welfare in 23 states that have an AFDC unemployed father program, which is federally matched, or in all of the states deserted that family so that the family and the children could go on welfare because of the absence of a father in the home. Basically, what this administration is saying, and what I think the Congress will adopt this year, is the basic provision that we must build into an income maintenance strategy a formula that intact families where there is a man in the home, that family and the children in that family will always be better off where the man is working than he's not working.
We have found not one single place, I repeat, not one single place, where any of this money has gone to put food in hungry mouths, clothes on naked bodies. If it were, then of course we would say this is a good program, but so far we've found none. It's written out, it's spelled out. Economic and political pressure groups, you say.
How do the leaders of the Episcopal Church view your activity?
Well, the current leadership, as would be embraced at the executive council level, I don't think would look too favorably upon us.
You're a rebel then within the ranks of the church?
Yes, you know, in a sense, we're against the establishment, which sounds rather odd, doesn't it? We're against the current leadership as it is promoting this kind of program. And I believe that the people are opposed to it, as evidenced by the failure of the church, not only in its communicant status, but over $3 million was not given this year. And it looks like more is going to be withdrawn by the people in the pews because they don't look favorably upon this.
Dr. Kratzig, what are
I think the biggest need to be reformed has to do with probably our most controversial part, and that has to do with income supplementation to the working poor, because this relates to our whole strategy of the encouragement of able-bodied men and women to be better off working than on welfare. We have had some difficulty in some parts of the country and with some people trying to get them to understand that the kind of welfare system we have in AFDC today, which is a federal-state system but under federal law, provides a disincentive for able-bodied men to work. It provides a financial disincentive for able-bodied men to stay in the home.
I do not feel that the church can engage in this kind of program and be, as you say, viable because they are creating a great polarization. There are people who have honest opinions on both sides of the fence, both sides of the political spectrum of life. And as soon as the church begins to take a position that we should become involved, then they are really making a judgment on all people, and they're alienating these people from the true spirit of the church and what the church stands for.
Give us an example, if you will, of these groups that you find that are undesirable that the church seems to be catering to.
Well, of course, one of the most famous is the Alianza de Federal Mercedes in New Mexico, and as a result of this particular group, the Bishop of New Mexico and Southwest Texas removed all the funds from the Executive Council last year. This group advocated taking over the state of New Mexico, parts of California, parts of Texas for their own government. And the head of this group is in federal penitentiary now for having attempted a seizure of the state building.
How were church funds used by this group?
Well, over $40,000 was given to it with no accountability. In other words, they could do with it what they wanted to do.
Yes. There are only 13,000 members nationally in the Brotherhood of Railway Signalmen's Union. Though small in numbers, the union has forced President Nixon to go to Congress for the third time since taking office to ask for an emergency measure to avert a nationwide rail strike. Nixon is asking for the Congress to pass a joint resolution to extend the signalman's contract to July 1st, which would allow for more bargaining time. As of early this afternoon, Congress had not acted on that request. The signalmen are asking for a 66% hike in wages. They have been offered 42%, but according to union officials, no fringe benefits were included, which is a major part of their demands. A prolonged strike could be a tremendous harm to the nation's economy. The impact of the strike should be felt in 2 or 3 days if the strike is allowed to continue that long. Jim Green, Channel 8 News on the Move, Fort Worth.
Advertising exists because merchants have goods or services that they have to sell. And it exists in our newspaper because we have to make enough money to publish a newspaper. And every newspaper has a ratio of so much advertising, so much news. And we assist the merchant in his selling of his goods and services by having this advertising availability in our newspaper.
How much advertising is there in a newspaper like the News?
Well, in the two Dallas newspapers, there are over 50 million lines of advertising published each year. Now, in terms of pages, which probably you can understand better, there's better than 22,000 pages, full pages of advertising. Each newspaper publishes over 30,000 total pages. The 22,000 pages of advertising relates to average newspaper of about 50 pages you get each day. So there's considerable volume of advertising in the newspaper each year.
How would you go about putting an advertisement in the paper?
Well, let's assume that you have a dress shop someplace in Dallas and the shipment of dresses in, you want to sell them. So you probably would call us and say, I have a dress, I'd like to advertise in the news. We'd send a salesman out. And they would talk to you about the dress and talk to you about copy, like it says in the book here. They'd like to know, and you'd like to tell the people that you want to sell this dress to about if it had a brand name and a fabric and colors and patterns and sizes and price and all this. The salesman would get this information from you. And if you didn't have an illustration of the dress, he'd probably bring the dress back to our art department. And we would draw the dress, our artists would draw it and prepare a layout. The salesman would bring this back to you. And if it looked all right, the copy was right, then he'd bring it back and our composing room would prepare that in type. We'd bring a proof back to you. If it was all right, then we would run the ad.
How far in advance do you have to have your advertisement in before it can be put in the paper?
Well, approximately 24 hours. But this is without seeing the proof that I mentioned. If you want to see a proof, we ought to have it about 4 days in advance of publication. This gives us a chance to get it in type and show you the proof so there's no errors in your ad.
How many salesmen do you have here at the News?
We have approximately 25 what we call retail salesmen. These call on local merchants like department stores, drug stores, grocery stores. We have about 15 classified salesmen. We call on used car lots and automobile dealerships, things of this nature. And we have 40 women in our classified telephone room who are there all day long, listening to the telephone. People call them, want to sell a kitten or look for a job or say they have a car for sale, something of this nature.
Do you employ students here during the summer?
We do. Our outside sales staff, we generally have about 6 or 8 college students who are in their second or third year of their university courses. And they'll come in and work with our salesman, and then when one of them goes on vacation, they'll take his territory. And we also have a service department where we employ high school students. This is more of messenger service or clerical work, handling the ads after the salesman bring them in the paper.
We have the local news, and we have our telegraph news, which includes our foreign news, national and state news. We have the amusements department, women's department, the religious department, oil, sports, business, real estate, travel. I think that's about it.
What is a news beat?
News beat is a special assignment. Writer is assigned to a special beat, for example, courthouse or the religious beat or something of that nature. And he's well qualified in that field and trained for it. For example, our school beat reporter is well qualified to know all about that particular beat.
Well, how many beats are there?
I would guess we have about 20 special beats. And of course, the whole city, we have people calling in news tips, things of that nature that they would not be considered regular beats.
Mm-hmm. Well, could you trace the step of a story from its beginning to its final appearance in the paper?
I'll try. We have a reporter may come in from his beat. Of course, he'll sit down at the typewriter and write his story. And then he takes his story and gives it to the city editor, who will edit the copy and designate the headline that he wants in that particular copy. And then he will send the copy to our universal desk, where someone will write a headline on that copy. And then the copy will go to our news editor, who will check it through and log it on a log sheet and designate whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 in priority of whether they should run that paper in the morning. And then he will send it, or give it to the copy boy, who will send it up the tube into our composing room. And then it's the job of the makeup editor to make certain that it gets in the paper. And the makeup editor will oversee when the printers are making up the pages. And then, of course, from then on, it's all mechanical. The page will go to the stereotype department, and eventually go to the press room, and eventually it will be published about 2 o'clock in the morning.
What is the job of a news editor?
It's the news editor must evaluate the stories, and also along with the telegraph editor, we have only use 15% of all the telegraph news that we receive each day, and it's the job of the news editor to determine which 15% that we should use, and he also grades the local copy to see which must be used each day. And he is actually in charge of, for example, stopping the press. He would be the one to stop the press at night if a major story happens.
What is a deadline?
Well, we have different deadlines. We actually have 3. Say at 7 o'clock at night for the first edition, and that's when the copy absolutely has to be in to be published. And our last edition, we say at 12:45, but if it's a major story, we may work till 4 o'clock in the morning to make certain stories in.
What are your sources of news?
We have different sources. Of course, most of the stories will come from a beat, but we have people calling us news tips, and our own staff may get news tips, and that's mainly where stories will come from.
Do you have young reporters?
We have a summer intern program where we take college students, but we also have used news tips. We have one in particular, Hillcrest High School student, who has given us 3 news tips. And he is a copy boy, but he manages to let us know of certain stories that may be coming up.
How did your career begin?
I started out on a weekly paper in Victoria. I worked in Kennedy on a weekly paper. I went into the Navy, and I went to college and started my own paper in Victoria. And from there, I went to the Corpus Christi Caller-Times in the sports department, and under the Austin American. I came here about 18 years ago. I started in sports here, and then I was makeup editor, assistant news editor, senior news editor, up until now.
Tim, there are some 500 of our employees involved in producing the paper. That is, not in the advertising or news department. They set the stories into page form, and I have some lines of type that are cast on machines. These stories are then put into page form, assembled, if it's an ad, into ads that are assembled into page form in our composing room. That would produce one newspaper page. To produce some 300,000 every day of a complete newspaper, we need to print with our high-speed presses. We have 4 of those, and we need plates, semi-cylindrical plates, that can run at high speed with web printing. Our stereotype department converts the flat form with a mat, which is moist, and an impression is made of the page. It's then formed, dried, and semi-cylindrical plates are produced. These weigh about 35 pounds each, and we need one for each page of the paper and one for each press that we run. The presses run 40,000 papers an hour into our mailing room, where they're counted, stacked, bundled, wrapped, and marked for distribution to the carrier boys or street sales.
Okay. Suppose I was, say, a sports writer. What steps would my story go through before reaching the printed form?
Well, Tim, your story would come out as type copy to the composing room, where it would be converted into some punch paper tape, which can be used to run our line casting machines. The story in galley form is then proofed, corrected, and placed into the form for use in the paper. Its place in the paper is determined by the editors.
Okay. How much paper do you use each day?
150 tons of paper a day. That's over 2 carloads. That's 55,000 tons a year.
Where do you get all that paper?
All of our paper comes from the south and is made from pine. There are 4 mills supplying our needs.
Okay. What is your largest investment in your production department?
The newspaper presses are our largest investment. There's over $6 million invested in that department.
Seems to be an expensive operation, if you ask me. How much of your materials are reusable?
Well, within the plant, there's very little loss. The plates, the 35-pound lead plates, that's a lead, tin, and antimony combination, are remelted every night in a large melting furnace in our basement and held in molten form to be reused the next night.
We concentrate in Texas, but we have mail circulation in most states in the United States and several foreign countries.
How does the paper get from the press to the customer and home?
Well, the papers come from the press to our mailing room and is put together in our mailing room and bundled in bundles and sent on a conveyor to our transportation department. They take the papers and deliver them to our independent contractors, who in turn deliver them to their carrier boys, and they start to deliver to the homes.
How many papers do you print each day?
We print daily approximately 256,000 and 298,000 on Sunday.
Is it a hassle for the papers to be out on time?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a hassle, but sometimes it is a challenge to get the paper to their customer on time, because the circulation department is the last people to handle our product, and if it is not given to us on time, it's impossible for us to get it delivered on time.
How many carriers do you have?
Dallas County, we have 1,200.
How many auditions do you have also?
We have 3 editions daily. The 2-star edition is the edition that goes to our mail subscribers. The 3-star edition is mostly we send out to in our retail trading zone, and the 4-star edition is the last edition, which is delivered in Dallas County and metropolitan area.
What is an independent contractor?
An independent contractor is a person that contracts with the Dallas News
to handle the service, the collection, and the solicitation in a given territory.
Does most customers realize what the carriers go through?
Well, I doubt that. I'm afraid many of our customers, when they walk out and pick up their paper, either in the yard or on their porch, that many times they don't realize what the carrier has gone through to get the paper there.
Do you always need carriers?
Yes, we are. In fact, now, why, we would like to have several more carriers. There, for the last couple of 3 years, there's been somewhat of a carrier shortage.
If a person wants to start or stop, what does he do?
If a person wants to start or stop, he calls our customer service department, and the phone number is 742-1211, and we have people there that will start the paper, stop it, or if they miss the paper or any kind of complaint, they will accept it.
La Raza is a party in 1972. Will you be strong enough to place candidates before the people statewide?
Our plans for the Partido de la Raza Unida are contingent on the redistricting plans of the legislature. If it is favorable to us, the plan they finally draw up, we will go statewide. If it remains mostly the same as it is now, we will go regional and continue expanding regionally as we've been doing.
Are there plans to place a candidate for governor of the state?
Yes, not in the immediate future, not only governor, but president.
We have to face the fact that we are perpetuating the need for welfare by our failure to pay attention to a lot of other needs that people have in a society as ours. I refer to housing, I refer to training, I refer to discrimination in employment, in education, I refer to health delivery, I refer to nutrition. The whole complex of our systems that impinge on human life living in our country have been neglected. And the results of those neglects, or neglect in those various areas, is represented by the need for welfare. There's no end in sight unless, and I hate this phrase, unless we reorder our priorities. Now, what do we mean by that? It means simply that just as we have a foreign policy for our government, we have a fiscal policy for our government, we have a variety of policy stances the United States government has. We do not have really an integrated human resource policy. And until we have that, we cannot then make the choices, select the options, allocate resources to implement that policy. And until we do that, I would say, no, there's no end in sight to meeting human needs.
If there was one thing that the United States government could do right now, today, that would benefit the system that we now have the most, what would it be?
I would say we would elevate the priority in the rank of our national priorities, elevate the welfare of people, and be willing to spend the money and use the manpower in order to implement that kind of policy.